You're listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast with your host, Derek Hyde and Garrett Lay.
Hello and welcome to AAF Analyzed Week 7 Recap. I am Derek Hyde and as always alongside me, Garrett Lay. Before we get started, do not forget, if you're listening on YouTube, to like and subscribe. If you're on SoundCloud, to like and give us a follow. And subscribe and leave us a review on our Apple Podcast page. Follow us on Twitter at AAF Analyzed to keep up with all the latest news and episode release announcements. We just retweeted something very important about the playoff race as it's getting down to the nitty-gritty with just 3 games left to play. And now, we pause for a word from our sponsor, Orca Coolers. Show off your AAF team pride with Orca Coolers, the best coolers and insulated drinkware on the market. Orca Coolers' new AAF team-logoed coolers and insulated chasers and Rockets drinkware will make you the hit of the tailgate. You can take your new Orca appliances to the stadium for the tailgate or even use them while you're watching from your house or your very comfortable couch. Orca Coolers drinkware and apparel are available online at orcacoolers.com. That is ORCA Coolers.com. NFL, NHL, MLB, and NCAA logoed merchandise is also available. Orca Coolers is extending a special offer just to our listeners. Just enter code AAF Analyzed in all caps, no spaces, for free shipping when you place your order online.
Woo! Through the ad. All right. So before we get started here, we can go ahead and run through maybe those postseason probabilities that we did retweet on the Twitter account, just to give the listeners a view of the playoffs here. So this is courtesy of NoExtraPoints.com. We talk about them, of course, all the time. They provide all those AAF statistics and stuff, and it's where we get most of our info. So if you're looking for AAF info for yourself, I'd recommend checking them out. But for the postseason probabilities, in the East here, we have Orlando, of course, sitting at 6-1. They have a 100% chance to make the playoffs right now. Birmingham sitting at 4-3, 86% chance to make the playoffs. Atlanta 2-5. They are not out of it yet. They have an 8% chance of making the playoffs. And Memphis sitting at 2-5 has a 6% chance of making the playoffs. Moving to the West, San Antonio at 5-2 has a 97% chance to make the playoffs. Arizona at 4-3 has a 74% chance. San Diego at 3-4 has a 26% chance, and Salt Lake is actually technically still in it. They have a 2% chance of making it to the playoffs.
Yeah, things are getting very close, and we'll just have to wait and see, figure out what happens.
Yeah, so now we can move on to a very important part of this week, at least in my opinion, and that would be our picks for Week 7. So, Derek, who got more right this week?
For the first time in AAF Analyzed history, Garrett did pick a better week than I did, because I went for the upset for San Diego, and unfortunately they did not pull through for me. I finished this week at a measly 2-2. Garrett pulled off some of my kind of numbers at 3-1. I'm still 3 games up on the year, though. 18-10 for me, 15-13 for Garrett. He's got a long way to go before he can catch the master.
I do. I pretty much I have to get a game up on you every week this week?
Yes.
Or every one of the weeks of the remaining? Okay. Well,
so
plus
I'll
I
just
guess
pick
technically
the favorite, and then you get your bold predictions going.
Yeah, and I guess technically the championships and the playoffs will probably include in these numbers, but
we will.
Still got a shot. I'm not, just like Salt Lake, I'm not mathematically eliminated yet, but chances are looking slim.
Very slim.
All right, so Derek, go ahead. Why don't you kick us off with our first game recap of the week, which was the Orlando Apollos at the Atlanta Legends, and as we know, the Apollos took this game pretty handedly, 36-6.
Let's kick it off with our first game recap. Orlando taking on the Legends in Atlanta. It's the rematch that we were all waiting for from Week 1. The Apollos, they took care of business pretty easily, though. They had a 36-6 victory, so if you think on the bright side, it was a little bit closer than Week 1. At the beginning, this game had the looks that it could be a close one, but that thought was very quickly ended. Both teams shredded the opposing team's defenses on their opening drives and ended them with touchdowns. These two drives took up the entirety of the first quarter and ended with an Orlando 8-6 lead. The first Orlando touchdown was scored by Davion Smith, and he would score another touchdown before the half to give Orlando a 14-6 lead at halftime. At this point, you would think that both teams have a shot to win this game, but that certainly was not the case. The first Orlando drive following half ended with a Davion Smith touchdown, and if you were counting, yes, that would be his third touchdown of the game, and there's still another 25 minutes or so to go. Incredible stuff from
He was
Davion.
going off. He was popping off.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they were short runs, most of them. But, I mean, you're getting in the end zone. So, end zone's the end zone no matter how far away you are. Ask Trent Richardson.
Yeah, exactly. Just ask Trent. From here on, the Apollos would just continue to pour it on. Aaron Murray would throw a pick six at the hands of Deji Olatoye with a 2-point conversion. This would lead to the benching of Aaron Murray. And Garrett Gilbert would throw a touchdown to Charles Johnson and convert the 2-point conversion as well. The Apollos would attempt one pass after that last touchdown and just run out the clock as they take this one easily, 36-6. Key players in the game, Garrett Gilbert went 19 of 23 for 217 yards, but only one touchdown.
Oh, no.
Davion Smith had 13 carries for 40 yards and 3 touchdowns, looking like Trent Richardson over here. And Charles Johnson, 4 receptions, 31 yards, 1 touchdown. For the Legends, Aaron Murray went 16 of 22 for 135 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. And Malachi Jones, 6 receptions for 53 yards and 1 touchdown. All of that was in the first half, though. So,
Hey, you know what? Yeah, the Legends still haven't had a very emergent wide receiver number one. It seems like Shantavius and Malachi Jones both are kind of, I guess, jonesing for that number one position. But this game, Malachi took it. 6 receptions, solid, 53 yards, also solid, and 1 touchdown, very solid. In terms of fantasy, though, I'd be pretty careful starting really any Legends wide receiver. There's really no pattern to who gets more targets. The ball's spread around all the time, so I wouldn't think this is going to be any indication of Malachi's role in the offense, but who knows?
yeah, I'd be pretty cautious starting just about any Legends player because sometimes they can go off or sometimes they kind of fall off a cliff.
Yep.
Like Folston is very hit or miss so far, and as you just talked about the wide receivers. So, top stories for the game, though. Complete domination is the one way that I can describe this game. The Apollos led in every possible category, from first downs and turnovers to yards and yards per play average. There was just nothing that the Legends led in. Their possession style of play didn't even work either, as the Apollos had more possession time and total plays run, something we haven't seen during Ken Zampese's role of the Legends.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what happened there. You thought maybe Zampese would have been able to conquer this Orlando Apollos defense. He'd really pretty much schooled the other defenses he played against before, but they really had him figured out. They didn't let his game plan get into effect at all with that kind of possession time for the Legends. I mean, Aaron Murray didn't help out either, throwing those 2 picks, but still, like you said, it was total domination from the Apollos.
That's true. And as we mentioned in our last episode, I talked about how Kevin Coyle and the Legends really needed to forget about that last game, and just as I kind of thought would happen, history repeated itself. It's almost as if nothing changed. The Apollos put a beating on the Legends. The first game was 40-6, and this one was 36-6. So I guess if you want to look at the bright side, the Legends defense improved by 4 points.
That's not much of a bright side.
No.
Yeah.
We try to be optimistic here, Garrett.
We do.
The first game was eerily similar to this one, though, as the Legends scored their only points in the first quarter. Well, it was in the second quarter technically, but 95% of that drive was the first quarter, so we'll count it there.
Okay, that's fine. I'm on board with that.
They benched their starting quarterback, and the seemingly good secondary that the Legends should have got killed. And, of course, the obvious, they lose by 30-plus points.
Yeah, the secondary getting slaughtered was kind of a surprise to me. I mean, the teams that they had played where their secondary played well, it wasn't like they have awful receiving cores. I mean, their secondary played really well against the Hotshots that week where they beat them. And they have, of course, Rashad Ross. So I'm not sure what happened there. They just didn't really come to play. Normally, Those safeties they have play a lot better than they did as well. And really just overall, this Legends team did not look to be the same team that we had seen during those games that they won.
Nah, and we were just looking at the standings page on the AAF website, and we were looking at the stats. Atlanta Legends, they are dead last in points for with 79. The next closest has 121 points for, and they're also dead last in points against with 196 points against. Next closest is 160. The Legends are a minus 117 in net points, and there's no one close to them in either category.
Yeah, minus 17 might be one of the worst numbers you could ever hear.
Yeah,
as a football team in terms of trying to score points. I don't think you could even expect to make the playoffs with a differential like that. Mm-hmm. So I do feel bad for the Legends. I particularly feel bad for myself because I picked them to do so well, and things looked so good for like 2 games. And now that it's all changed again, but they will have plenty to look at, plenty of soul searching to do during these next 3 weeks. You just have to improve. I know you could still technically make the playoffs, but right now focus on figuring out what you're going to do to make your team just a little bit better so you end the season on a high note. I think that's really what is going to be important for the Legends to focus on here.
Yeah, if you kind of think about that net point differential, though, nearly half of those are just from the Apollos.
Yeah, the Apollos and the Legends are not going to get along very well.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, you know. Let's go back to the stories of the game. Aaron Murray gets benched. The once prominent Aaron Murray has just thrown 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions over his past 2 games. And much like earlier for the Legends, they placed their starter on the bench in favor of the backup. Except this time, Aaron Murray and Matt Sims swapped roles. Murray certainly was not on his game, as he had some pretty bad misses. And for one example, he missed a wide open receiver 40 yards downfield. It was just way too high, and his receiver had no chance of getting there.
Yeah, also, fun little fact, Aaron Murray was bleeding a little bit during that game.
Sent you that picture.
We aren't sure what happened there. I know. I think it's kind of funny because the same thing happened when Matt Sims started bleeding from his hand or whatever. He ended up not playing very well, and then he got sat for Aaron Murray, and then Aaron Murray starts bleeding from his face, and he gets swapped for Matt Sims. So I guess when the quarterback's blood is drawn, it seems like it's time to switch things up for the Legends.
Yeah, Aaron Murray got crushed on a play where he lost his helmet. He was bleeding from his cheek. He looked like Rambo as the blood spilled down his one cheek onto his neck. It was on his jersey. It was very gross, but I'm sure you could find the picture somewhere if you look hard enough.
Yeah, but in terms of Matt Sims, he didn't have a bad performance at all once he came in. He only got to throw 8 passes, but he went 5 for 8 for 60 yards and averaged 7.5 yards per pass attempt there. He looked okay. He looked pretty much just like the Matt Sims we had seen before Aaron Murray came back. It'll be interesting to see if him and Zampese have the same kind of connection that Murray and Zampese seemed to have, at least when their offense was really rolling. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sims is the starter next week. But they also might try to throw Aaron Murray back in there just to end the season with him if they think he's going to be their starter next year.
Yep, we'll have to wait and see. Let's talk about that other quarterback, though. Garrett Gilbert broke the streak. At long last, the Garrett Gilbert 200 yards and 2 touchdown streak has ended. But only half of it has ended, because Gilbert still threw for over 200 yards with 217, but this time he only had 1 touchdown. So the end of the streak together has occurred, but the 200 yards in a game streak will continue on for hopefully the rest of the season.
Yeah, you know what? If all the Apollos ask of Gilbert is to throw for over 200 yards and 1 touchdown, I think they'll still be fine, particularly when their running back scores 3 touchdowns.
I think we'll be seeing them in Frisco, Texas, if that happens.
Yeah, I hope so.
And real quickly, the Hot Shots loss clearly didn't affect the Apollos. They showed everyone that despite that 1 loss, they're still the team to beat, and that game was just a fluke. Playoff implications for the game. The East is basically locked up following this game. The Apollos clinched their spot in the playoffs, while the Legends basically need a miracle to hop the iron, and same thing for the Express. Let's go to game MVPs for the game. You can't argue with it. Davion Smith. We had just said earlier in the season that if you scored 3 touchdowns, the game MVP award is yours. Davion scored the hat trick by the start of the third quarter, making him my very deserved MVP.
Yeah, I can't argue with the 3-touchdown rule. We're going to give it to Davion Smith here, but also I would maybe give a little nod to the Apollos defense. They really had the Legends number this game and absolutely smothered the previously explosive Legends offense. It was a whole team effort to absolutely thrash the Legends here, but the defense really played quite well.
Yep, absolutely. Can't argue with 6 points.
No, you can't. The defense is probably feeling pretty good right now. Speaking of a game that was a little bit closer than 36-6, our next game to talk about here is the Stallions at the Commanders, and San Antonio was able to edge this one out at the very end, winning this game 19-15. We had a feeling it would be a close game, and it certainly was, and just like we thought, the home team prevailed in the end. Speaking of the home team, attendance was unbelievable for the Commanders. These Texans love their football. Over 30,000 people showed up, and you could really hear it when you watched the game. They were loud on third downs and things like that, and I do actually think that the attendance there played a big advantage in the Commanders being able to take this win. But at the beginning, the Stallions made an attempt to quiet the crowd early with a solid first drive that ended in a 32-yard field goal, but Logan Woodside and Mikhail McKay weren't about to let that happen with a sweet 21-yard passing touchdown the following drive where McKay absolutely mossed the defender for the score. It was the kind of play that makes you think that he's probably going to be in the NFL next year because he got up and over this cornerback. It was excellent, and the crowd was in the game once again. The Stallions tacked on another field goal early in the second to make it 6-9, but after that, both teams went relatively stagnant, with each quarterback throwing a pick in that time. No one scored again until 9 minutes left in the third when the Stallions kicked a 53-yard field goal to knot it up at 9-9. Then the game became a defensive struggle, with neither team being able to get anything going on offense. Now, the Stallions' secondary looked much improved, and their pass rush was crazy, recording 5 sacks before even the end of the third, and they would end up with 6 sacks on the day. We hadn't seen a number that high since Week 1, when the Commanders were able to sack Mike Bercovici 6 times. Then, with 12 minutes left in the game, Woodside was injured on a sack, and backup quarterback Marquise Williams would come in on the next drive after the Commanders stopped the Stallions once again.
The Stallions' defensive line is just so good. It's unbelievable.
Oh, they are. They're disgusting. I'm going to talk about them a little bit later and why I think they had such a dominant performance. But a player who actually showed up and showed out and had a pretty dominant performance himself was Marquise Williams after he came in. He came in for that injured Logan Woodside, and he stepped up big time. After scrambling for a first down on 3rd and 8 and running for another first on 2nd and 4, he hit Greg Ward Jr. for 13 yards and then capped it off with a short pass to Trey Williams that Williams has blazing speed, and he took it to the house for a 36-yard touchdown. Williams would convert the 2-point conversion with a pass to Greg Ward Jr., and the Commanders now have a 17-9 lead. Things continue to get even more exciting here as the Stallions get the ball back with a little over 5 minutes left in the game. And then with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Josh Woodrum tosses a 21-yard touchdown to Terrell Newby to make it 15-17. All they need is a 2-point conversion to tie it up and take this game to overtime. But then, for the first time in AAF history, Josh Woodrum is picked off on a rough throw on that 2-point conversion, and the playmaker Devontae Bowsby takes it all the way back the other way. The Commanders 2 more points, and that makes it 19-15. The Commanders get the ball back, and Marquise Williams runs for a first down on 3rd and 3, and that ends the game because they are now able to kneel it out. That pick on the 2-point conversion was excellent. He jumped that route hard. It was a great play. And, of course, mad respect to the secondary.
It was pretty crazy there that the game could end like that because you were really looking for it to be a one-score game. You need a field goal and you can win it, or it's tied. And just like that, you're down by more than a field goal and you're on the outside looking in.
Yeah, it was super exciting ending. Throughout the game here, we have some players who played pretty well for both teams. Josh Woodrum, he was 22 for 35 for 229, a touchdown. But, of course, he had 2 picks, actually. The stat tracker didn't consider his one a pick on the 2-point conversion, but it was definitely a pick. So he ended up with 2 picks on the game. Nick Truesdale, the tight end, he had 4 catches for 74 yards. And I believe after this game, when targeted, Truesdale is like 21 of 23 on catches, so he pretty much catches everything thrown his way, which is really excellent to see from a tight end. And then Stallions linebacker Trevor Riley recorded 5 tackles, 2 tackles for losses, 1 sack, and 1 quarterback hit. And then for the Commanders, Logan Woodside, he kind of returned to his normal form. He went 13 for 19 for 164 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Marquise Williams, he was 2 for 3 for 49 yards. He had a touchdown and then tacked on 19 rushing yards. And those rushing yards were super important, particularly at the end of the game, because he was running for first downs pretty much the whole time. Commanders tight end Evan Rodriguez had 3 catches for 71 yards. He had a great game. And then Devontae Bowsby, of course, had 3 tackles, a pass defended, and the game-winning pick. He now leads the Alliance with 5 picks overall.
Yeah, really great game from that Commanders team. The Commanders defense has been incredible as of late. Will the Stallions continue to be the most unlucky team I've ever seen with my 2 eyes and fall deeper into the sub-500 wormhole?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons the Stallions have been so unlucky is partly their own fault, and that would be their turnovers. At this point, you could almost argue that turnovers is the only thing holding the Stallions back. But unfortunately, even if they fix it, they're going to really have to wait until next year to implement their newfound ability to keep possession of the ball in order to get to the playoffs. They had 2 turnovers of this game, one, of course, being the nail in the coffin with Woodrum's pick on the 2-point conversion, but they fumbled 4 times. Somehow they were able to not lose any of them, but they really need to fix that. If you watch the game, almost every time Joel Bonio touched the ball, he was losing it, and it wasn't even after he got hit either. He would, take a handoff and make a cut, and then the ball would just fly out of his arms. I'm not totally sure what was happening there, but it looked really weird. And he really needs to work on ball security.
It's kind of what happens when you lose Brandon Oliver, and it all relies on one guy's shoulders. Bonio just looked nervous, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we've been really high on this team because they're actually a good team, but that ball security issue is a major problem that we don't have an answer to. They can still make the playoffs, though, if 4 things happen. They have the lowest percentage chance of doing it because these 4 things need to happen. Number 1, the Stallions win these last 3 games. Number 2, the Arizona Hotshots do not win a single game the next 3 weeks. Number 3, San Diego loses next 2 weeks, so week 8 and week 9, and then week 10, San Diego needs to defeat Arizona at home. Only then do the Stallions finish 5-5, and Arizona and San Diego would both end 4-6. So they kind of need a miracle.
It would be quite the miracle there for them to make the playoffs. But hey, you gotta hope for it. It can happen. If they do make it, that will be absolutely ridiculous. And I'm sure no one would be mad because that's just crazy. I mean, of course, except for Hotshots and Fleet fans. But yeah, what's another positive for the Stallions probably going into next season, because it doesn't look like we're going to see them in the playoffs? That's Stallions' defense. Yeah, they lost, but you can't really blame it on their defense, that's for sure. They held the Commanders to 240 yards and gave up only 64 rushing yards again. Their rushing defense has been spectacular. I can't believe they haven't ridden that kind of play from their defense to more wins. Not only that, they had 6 sacks, which was fabulous. None for Cutter Schultz, though, but that was pretty much because he was being double-teamed the entire game, which lets those huge interior linemen like Mike Purcell have an absolute field day. Purcell ended with 2 sacks. Like I said, Trevor Riley had 1. And then the other interior lineman, I can't remember his name right now, but I know he had 1 as well. Their secondary looked much improved as well, coming away with a pick and not really giving up much in terms of a passing game. So if they are going to have a positive out of this loss, it's going to be that defensive play. They're starting to look real scary. But the other defense that also looked quite... Oh, Palapoy. Okay, so Palapoy, I think he had a sack as well. Those interior linemen are big dudes, and they are scary. And with Carter Schultz being double-teamed, they had no answer for blocking those guys up the middle, and Woodside was getting crunched. But unfortunately for the Stallions defense, who put up a valiant effort, the Commanders defense also played really well and were able to do more in terms of stuffing the Stallions offense. Stallions, of course, caught the L there thanks to that excellent Commanders defensive play. In classic Commanders style, they still gave up over 200 passing yards and a touchdown, but came away with those 2 vital picks that really proved to be the difference. They also took a page from the Stallions' book and smothered the Salt Lake run game that has been struggling. Since you mentioned, losing Brandon Oliver has really hurt them, and they held them to only 49 rushing yards.
Yeah, this Commanders defense has made a complete turnaround since they were last in passing defense about 4 weeks ago. And their entire team has caught fire. Woodside's been fantastic. Their defense has been fantastic. Trey Williams is making a name for himself. Greg Ward Jr. caught a touchdown today. It's just been fantastic to watch, and they really appear to be the team to beat in the West. And I'm very happy for them because preseason predictions has them in the championship.
Yeah, you're feeling good about your preseason predictions, aren't you?
Feeling fantastic. Come on. 3 of the 4 people I chose are currently sitting in playoff position.
Ah, yes. Congratulations, Derek.
Thank you.
That so is not the case for me. But, yeah, whatever. Another question I have coming out of this game is, will Salt Lake change it up at quarterback? They aren't mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but things aren't looking great, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe they should try something new. I still really like Woodrum, but the games where he didn't play, the Stallions' offense was an absolute shambles. But he still isn't bringing them wins. He throws costly picks, and despite the solid yardage numbers, he just isn't getting the job done. So I'm starting to wonder if they might test out some of the other quarterbacks they have on their roster to see what's going to happen going into next season.
I don't know if they will, though, because keep in mind, Woodrum's still trying to get on an NFL team, and their team was god-awful with the other guys under center. So
that's pretty much the only thing holding me back from saying that they are going to actually do it is because of just how bad they were with those other quarterbacks.
They scored like
and
4
I don't really
points.
blame it. Yeah, I don't really blame it all on Josh either. Those picks are costly, but when your running game only has 49 yards, it's really hard to get any kind of offense going at all. So I would like to see Woodrum start, but you might see some other quarterbacks make appearances in these next 3 weeks.
Maybe.
Another quarterback we have to talk about, though, is Logan Woodside. He returned to really his normal numbers this week. I'd credit this win to I'd credit this change in numbers to really the more impressive Stallions secondary than a poor performance. I think he came into this game expecting for some big yardage numbers, and the Stallions secondary really showed up and showed out this week, and I don't think this is what he was expecting to see. His receivers were pretty much held in check most of the time. He still had a good game. He didn't throw. His pick that he threw wasn't very costly, and they were able to edge out a win.
Yeah, Logan Woodside has been very impressive in recent weeks, so much so that the broadcasters were drawing comparisons between Logan Woodside and Cam Newton. So clearly he's doing something right.
Well, I wonder if they're comparing him to Cam Newton in other aspects.
No, I think it's just his
playing
style.
If you know what I'm talking about.
Well, that could be a stretch. Woodside still has been impressive, but the real question is how long will he be out? Because he is a huge part of their success, and that injury could be a fatal blow to San Antonio.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know it's a shoulder injury. I don't know if it's his throwing shoulder or not. Marquise Williams seems solid, but he definitely seems like more of a runner than a passer. So the Commanders could be in trouble if he's not ready for their playoff push. But right now it seems like he's okay. We, of course, will keep you updated when we do our Week 8 preview episode on Friday. One more quick key to the game here is Commanders punter Josh Zima. Hey, punter, nice job. His 5 punts for 233 yards and a long of 54 helped keep the Stallions away from the end zone when his offense couldn't get anything going, so I thought he deserved some props there.
I love the punters.
Yeah, gotta love them. So my game MVP, this one was really tough for me, but I'm pretty much going to have to give it out based not on stats but on clutchness alone, and that would be to quarterback Marquise Williams and Devontae Bowsby. Williams came off the bench and got those rushing first downs that they desperately needed and threw the touchdown that would put them in the lead. Of course, Trey Williams with that speed was also excellent to score that 36-yard touchdown. And then Devontae Bowsby really iced the game with that pick on the 2-point conversion. So in pure terms of clutchness, I'm going to give it to those players there.
That's fair. The players in the Commanders definitely had a solid game, but no one was really blowing off the stat sheet. Yeah. Woodside would be my MVP had he played the entire game, but because of that, I'm going to give my MVP to the 30,000 people in attendance. Their sheer size and volume definitely propelled the Commanders to the win, and hats off to them because I'm pretty sure that's an AAF attendance record.
Yes, it is. If you notice, the actual attendance numbers for the AAF would really take a dip when the Commanders didn't play at home. And then when the Commanders do play at home, they're back up to some really solid numbers. So thank you, San Antonio area, for keeping those numbers nice and high.
That's true.
Now, before we move on to the second half of the episode, we'd like to now pause for a quick word from our sponsor, Orca Coolers. Show off your AAF team pride with Orca Coolers and Drinkware. They're the best coolers and insulated drinkware on the market, guaranteed. Orca Coolers' new AAF team logoed coolers and insulated chasers and rockets drinkware will make you the hit of the tailgate. Integrated insulation ensures maximum ice and cold retention and freshness of your stowed items for up to 10 days. That's right, 10 days. Orca Coolers are the real deal. Coolers are available online at orcacoolers.com, as well as their drinkware. That is orcacoolers.com. Don't forget, you can also get NFL, NHL, MLB, and NCAA team logo merchandise, so you're ready for every single season. Orca Coolers is extending a special offer just to our listeners. Enter code AAFAnalyzed in all caps and no spaces for free shipping when you place your order online.
Will do.
Yeah, you should do that.
And now we move over to Sunday, where we have our first game, Fleet taking on the Hot Shots in Arizona. The Fleet would not be able to take this one as they continued their slipping games on the road. They really just have not been a good team there. But we now bring you to Arizona for the best weather I've seen in the Alliance yet. 77 degrees, no wind, so there's no excuse for a bad performance there, right?
No, there's none, Derek. Zero.
It's a beautiful day to play football.
Oh, it's so lovely.
This game had major playoff implications, and the first quarter was certainly fun to watch from a fan's perspective. The first quarter was very back and forth as San Diego would score, and the Hot Shots would immediately return the favor. Watson would score a touchdown for the Fleet, but it's followed by a Trevor Knight rushing touchdown. I think that was his first of the season, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so.
6-6. Teams then exchanged field goals, 9-9, and then the end of the first quarter, and that was basically the end of the Fleet offense, because Arizona would score for 14 points on back-to-back touchdowns and give them a very nice 23-6 lead. Berkovici would be able to throw a touchdown right before half to bring it within 23-15, but you really could have just turned the game off at halftime and not missed much of anything. The Hot Shots would cement the game with a very nice John Wolford scramble touchdown that involved a couple of missed tackles and a field goal, and they would finish off the game with a 32-15 win in favor of Arizona, giving them the almighty favored 2 seed in the West.
Yeah, that run by John Wolford was excellent. It was by far the best quarterback run we've seen from anybody all year. He split defenders. He broke the ankles of a Fleet safety who I'm sure would prefer if we didn't mention his name because he got absolutely embarrassed out there by Mr. John Wolford. He was looking a little bit like maybe one of my favorite quarterbacks, Mr. Josh Allen, running up the middle and splitting the defense for that score. He showed some serious speed, stuff that I did not know that Wolford had in him. So that was pretty awesome. I freaked out when I saw it, and I texted you, but I accidentally texted my girlfriend instead, and she was like, "What are you talking about? John Wolford is who?" I was like, that was supposed to go to Derek. So we could have had a special moment, Derek, and I ruined it. But that's okay. I still thought it was excellent. I was very impressed. I love to see quarterbacks run for touchdowns. I think it's sweet.
That's pretty funny. And it's kind of funny how they were talking about how Logan Woodside was the one drawing Cam Newton comparisons when John Wolford was the one that hit the gap as the quarterback and rushing it home for a touchdown. Pretty awesome to see the quarterbacks in the AAF doing so well. Key players for this game, John Wolford, 15-19, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 44 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Jarrell Presley, 15 carries, 64 yards. And Shaquille Richardson on the defense had 8 tackles, 2 pass defense, an interception, and a forced fumble. Doesn't get much better than that.
It doesn't.
And on the Fleet, Mike Berkovici, 22 of 43 for 310 yards. Normal day for him and a touchdown. He also threw 2 picks because that's the name of the game, turnovers. Bishop Sankey had 12 carries for 54 yards. He's really starting to get more usage in that offense. And Nelson Spruce, 12 catches for 146 yards, That's the AAF record for receptions in a game. Very impressive
12 catches. Wow. If you're in PPR, if your daily fantasy does PPR, if you started him, you are feeling excellent.
Absolutely. He got 15 targets, too, so it could have been more.
Dang.
Let's look at stories of this game. Berkovici continues the trend. Berkovici has made a habit for throwing for a lot of yards and a touchdown, but he's also made a habit of throwing very costly turnovers. Burko has 5 interceptions and a fumble over the past 3 weeks, so unless he cleans up his play, I think we're going to see the Fleet on the outside looking in come playoff time. They still have a chance, but
prediction.
you got to clean it up. The Fleet also really struggle to perform away from home. The Fleet are by no means a bad team, but they're a completely different team depending on whether or not they're playing in San Diego. So far this season, the Fleet have not won a single game on the road, and they score noticeably less. The Fleet average over 25 points per game at home, but less than 15 on the road, which is just another reason I don't really see them doing that well in the playoffs or even make it.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you're going to make it to the playoffs and do well, they would not have the home field advantage. So it's probably not going to happen that even if they were to make the playoffs, they're probably not going to take that first round win unless if they can figure out what the heck they're doing on the road. I know their next game at Salt Lake is on the road, so you're going to have to look to see if they can pick it up there.
It'll be a game of trends. The Stallions have been slipping as of late, but maybe the Stallions can get that all-important win because the Fleet also seem to slip on the road.
Yeah, it's going to be a big game. That should be a good one next week. That's a game I'm looking forward to watching.
Every team is playing a team in their side of the AAF, so some very good games coming up next week. We'll obviously talk about that in our next episode.
Great scheduling.
And let's move on. Quality game for the Arizona quarterbacks. Yeah, you heard that correctly. There were multiple Arizona quarterbacks that had a good game this week. And nothing bad happened to Wolford. He didn't get benched. He's not injured. Wolford was doing just fine. 15 of 19, for 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, 44 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. And Trevor Knight got a couple of snaps playing a read option, 4 rushes, 10 yards, and he added a very nice 7-yard touchdown.
Yeah, he tweeted out that felt really good. I was happy for him to see him end up in the end zone as well. He was one of the quarterbacks we were looking at maybe starting at the beginning of the season, but obviously Wolford has been playing excellently. But it was nice to see Knight get an opportunity to get in the end zone and put the team on his back that drive.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what position you are. If you score a touchdown, it's always a great feeling. That's why the offensive linemen love it so much. And let's go to Wolford's number 1 target this game, Nelson Spruce. I mentioned him as a key player, and Mike Martz has said that he's one of the best receivers he has ever coached over his illustrious career. And
wow.
Spruce just set the Alliance record for the most catches in a game with 12 and added 146 yards to go along with it. If only the entire team played as well as Spruce, because the Fleet would have walked out of there with a very handily win.
Yeah, that's quite the statement from Mike Martz, and I'm sure that makes Nelson Spruce feel good, knowing his coach has so much confidence in him. I know having a coach's confidence in you can really change your game. So good for Nelson Spruce.
Yep, very happy for him. And let's quickly talk about those playoff implications from this game, because they were huge. This game places Arizona firmly in the driver's seat for the 2nd seed in the West for the playoffs. Arizona is now a game up on the Fleet with just 3 games to go, and they currently own the tiebreaker. So unless Arizona falters, it's going to look like the Hotshots are going to be in there, or it's going to come down to that Week 10 game between the two of them. So that'll certainly be a great one to watch.
Yeah, if Arizona can win their game next week against the Commanders, they should feel pretty darn good about their spot, particularly since the Commanders are so hot right now. I would be worried about the Hotshots really in the playoffs because they seem to have figured out what they did wrong during that little skid that they had, and they're certainly picking it back up again.
Yeah, they're looking like one of the best once again. And now let's go to game MVPs. You can't argue with the formula. John Wolford. This is another situation where the 3-touchdown scenario prevails. Wolford was a game changer for his team, throwing for a pair of touchdowns and having one of the best runs by a quarterback this year for a touchdown. When you have 3 touchdowns in a game. We said it. Your MVP, John Wolford, got the hat trick, and now he's sitting with the crown.
Yep, I'm totally on board with that MVP. That run was nasty. He made great throws, great completion percentage, and he looked solid all around. So nice job, John Wolford, getting back in the driver's seat of the Hot Shots. All right, finally, the game you've all been waiting for, probably. The return of Johnny Manziel. He played a little bit. We'll talk about him a little bit because I'm sure all you heard during this game was talk about Johnny Manziel anyway. But regardless of whether or not Manziel played, this was an excellent game of football. And if you didn't enjoy it, you are not a football fan because let me tell you, I enjoyed every second of this game. The Memphis Express ended up winning in overtime, the first overtime game in AAF history. They took it 31-25. What an excellent game this was. Like I said, first OT game in AAF history, and it did not disappoint. Though, we would like to stop for a quick point of discussion, and the fact that they have an overtime where both teams get a possession is awesome, but the game can still end in a tie, which I'm going to say it is pretty stupid still.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's just, for people saying how much better the overtime in the AAF would be, why is a tie still an option? I thought that was one of the major problems with the NFL OT. I thought people hated ties.
I hate ties. Except for bow ties. I like bow ties.
Just play with the college rules. It's just, they have the best overtime. You can't tie. Everyone gets the ball. It's just fantastic to watch. I go to Penn State and obviously watched a fantastic OT game against Appalachian State, and I like those OT rules.
Yeah, I think they should actually move to NHL OT rules, 3-on-3.
Shootout.
Yeah, just a shootout. Just, what would a shootout be? Quarterback and then one receiver on one cornerback, and that's it?
I guess.
That'd be kind of exciting. I don't know. But, yeah, I agree with you. College rules for sure. Best overtime. Just an absolute offensive showdown until somebody can't get in the end zone. I think it's the most exciting way to end a game. Plus, there's no ties, and ties are stupid. But back to the game. Thank goodness it did not end in a tie, and it kept the Express's playoff hopes alive, albeit they are quite slim. The scoring in this game began with an 11-yard touchdown pass from Louis Perez to Brandon Bauman with 6:24 left in the first, and the Iron converted the 2-point conversion to go up 8-0. This capped off a massive 11-play, 94-yard, 5-minute drive, which is pretty much perfect football if you ask me. They controlled the clock, controlled the number of plays, and marched down the field. But Memphis responded with a great drive of their own, led by Brandon Silvers, and it went for 76 yards on 10 plays and ended with a 1-yard Terrence McGee touchdown run in which he engaged a sweet spin move to end up in the end zone. The Iron offense then said, hold our beer, and entered the Trent zone quickly on their next drive after 2 chunk plays. They got 28 yards on a passing play, followed that with 46 yards on a second passing play. They are at the Memphis 1-yard line, so I'm sure you can guess exactly what happened next. Trent Richardson slammed it up the middle for his 10th touchdown of the year and capped off the Trent zone appearance by running in the 2-point conversion, making it 16-8. A few defensive stops and a missed Express field goal later, we arrive at halftime with the score still 16-8. The Iron start out the third quarter with another long drive, 13 plays, 85 yards, and 5 more minutes, and end it by kicking a field goal. Then, Johnny Manziel comes in. Everyone is waiting with bated breath, and he makes a good throw. He makes a deep throw, but doesn't do much with the offense. He ended up getting sacked from 9 yards. I think this first one went 3 and out. I think my notes are incorrect because I know he made a deep throw at some point. So he doesn't have 2 3 and out drives, but he made that deep throw.
I think
he scrambled.
Got a first down and then went 3 and out.
Okay, so he got 1 first down on a deep
first
throw.
and 10, read option to the right, first down,
okay,
and then 3 and out.
All right, so that's pretty much what it was. He looked okay. We didn't get to see him much, so we can't really judge how he's going to be as a quarterback quite yet. What really exciting happened here was the Express blocked a punt, and they returned it for a touchdown. DeMarcus Gates, that prolific linebacker from the Express, was who blocked the punt, and Terrell Bonds picked it up straight off the ground and took it in for 6, and that made it 19-14 there. Then Manziel returns. This time he actually goes 3 and out here. The Iron then respond by scoring a touchdown on another passing TD from Louis Perez to make it 25-14. Brandon Silvers returns, and the Express get a field goal there. The Iron then go 3 and out, and Brandon Silvers leads a fabulous touchdown drive, hitting Reese Horn in the end zone for a 7-yard score to make it 23-25. Then, Silvers, with ice in his veins, fires the 2-point conversion over the middle to tie it up with 24 seconds left, and the Iron choose to kneel it out instead of going for a huge play to try to win the game. Welcome to overtime in the AAF, folks. The Iron get the ball first, but are unable to get in the end zone from 10 yards out. Really, they didn't get any yards at all. Luis Perez was forced out of the pocket quite a bit and was sacked at least once there, so nothing really happened for them. So the Express get a shot, which is excellent, of course, and Silvers delivers, hitting Daniel Williams for the game winner. Important players to note here. Brandon Silvers was absolutely spectacular in this game, going 24 for 35 for 266 yards and 2 touchdowns. We'll talk about Manziel. He went 3 for 5 for 48 yards, and he had 2 rushes for a combined 20 yards. Reese Horn is cementing himself as a great receiver as he had 7 catches for 113 yards and, of course, that would-be game-tying touchdown. And DeMarcus Gates, he had 3 penalties for 26 yards, one of which was a roughing the passer that gave the Iron a second chance at a 2-point conversion that they were then able to convert, but he ended up redeeming himself with 7 tackles and, of course, blocked that punt that was returned for a touchdown. And for the Iron, Luis Perez went 16 of 37 for 235 and 2 touchdowns. Trent Richardson had 56 yards and averaged 3.5 yards per carry, finally getting over that 3 yards per carry mark that he hadn't been able to top all year. And, of course, he had a touchdown. And then Amba Atatau was the leading receiver for the Iron with 3 catches for 71 yards.
Yeah, there were some fantastic players in this game. Brandon Silvers just fantastic the entire game. It's kind of weird, though, because he didn't get to play the whole time, trying to give Manziel some snaps. Reese Horn was fantastic. DeMarcus Gates pulling out that punt block. And Luis Perez was good, too. It's just everyone had a good game, which is why it went to overtime. And I guess in overtime, it's kind of a mix of getting lucky and who's still hot. And it appeared to be the Express.
Yeah, so first story coming out of this game is the Brandon Silvers, Johnny Manziel dual quarterback approach. First of all, wow, did they talk about Johnny a lot. Like, during halftime, when the Iron were winning, you mentioned this to me, almost no words were said about the Iron or the fact that they were winning. It was pretty much all Johnny Manziel talk. I'll talk some about Manziel here because he did, of course, play, but the man who deserves all the credit for this game is Brandon Silvers because he put the team on his back this game and had an epic performance. Manziel looked okay but didn't get a ton of playing time, had made most of his plays with his legs. But it's clear that Silvers is going to be Memphis' go-to guy. He had ice in his veins this game, making smart throws and never being shaken by an Iron pass rush that was able to take him down 3 times and hit him 9 times. Silvers was the Express's savior this game, and it was awesome. Also, side note, Manziel almost got into a fight, but hey, I like the passion.
I mean, you want to talk about the passion. He was also ridiculing a lot of the Iron defenders. They had him mic'd up. You could hear it the whole time. He also had some very unkind words to a player on the Iron that mocked his money sign celebration. And we won't mention those words, but he basically said he was going to screw him up. The Express, though, they played a very weird style where their QBs almost split quarters, and the playing time was not based on how well you played, which really upset me. Brandon Silvers was very, very impressive, but he only played the first and fourth quarters. But Johnny, who didn't even get close to Silvers' numbers, still got the second and third.
Yeah, that was pretty dumb. I'm glad that the Express were able to pull off this win because I would be tearing them to shreds for not starting Silvers the entire game. I would like to say, though, as maybe negative as you think it is with Manziel's strong words, he was the first one to run out and congratulate Silvers at the end of the game. He ran out there, slapped his helmet, gave him a big hug. I thought that was awesome to see. I think Manziel was just excited to be back playing football and being part of a team and winning. So I think that was really cool. And if you take anything from that, at least see that Manziel is there for the team. At least that's what it looks like now. I'm sure it did help that he got a little bit of playing time. But still, It was cool to see him congratulate Silvers because it looks like that's who the Express are going to have their trust in right now. Another player who had a massive game was Reese Horn. I said he was a player to watch because he had to prove that last week wasn't a fluke performance, and wow, he proved that he was the real deal this week. 7 receptions, 113 yards, and that game-tying touchdown. This dude was an animal. The chemistry he and Brandon Silvers have is undeniable, and he is now clearly the number one receiver on the Express.
Yeah, I really like Reese Horn. He just cemented himself as a top 5 receiver in the league in my eyes. He's now sitting at number 4 in total receiving yards. He gained some ground on Dantes Ford, who didn't get to play this week. But Rashad Ross and Charles Johnson, he's in company with them as he is nearly only 100 yards behind Rashad Ross and a little bit more than 100 behind Charles Johnson. So he could be one of the top dogs that no one really knows about. Hidden gem.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Express really start just bombing the ball to him these next coming weeks, considering how low of a chance they have at making the playoffs. Of course, it's still there, but I think they're going to, just like the Stallions, want to work on the things that are working for them and try to fix some mistakes. So I think that establishing that Brandon Silvers-Reese Horn connection is going to be a big point of emphasis these last couple weeks. Quick point here. If the Iron defense doesn't force turnovers, they don't win games. It's pretty much that simple. Their defense is totally turnover-based. If they have more than one forced turnover, they win. If they don't, they lose. Okay. That's pretty much it.
Okay, but let's be honest. This strategy has worked for the most part because there are multiple teams that struggle to keep a hold of the ball.
Oh, that's true.
It just so happens that Brandon Silvers decided that today was going to be the game of his life, and he was going to put on one heck of a performance.
Yeah, I think the Iron defense actually played a lot better, particularly their rushing defense. It was just actually this time their secondary that was a little weaker. Jamar Summers was hurt early in the game, and he went out, so that might have changed Reese Horn's numbers a little bit. But that run defense did look good. Their pass rush, which has been non-existent the past couple weeks, got to Silvers plenty of times, but Silvers had just, like I said, ice in his veins this game. He was not losing this one at home. I would like to mention, though, that Trent Richardson has figured out how to do more than score 1-yard touchdowns, even though he did also do that. He was able to find holes in the offensive line. He got first downs, normally dragging 3 defenders with him. He looked like a running back that is good for more than those 1-yard touchdowns and averaged more than 3 yards per carry for the first time ever. His improved play is definitely going to play a huge role in that playoff push.
Let's be honest, though. He still lives in the Trent zone. It just happens that he can kind of get yards a little bit outside of it now.
Yeah, it was nice. He was literally dragging like defenders with him a good 2 or 3 extra yards down the field. So he is still a scary, powerful runner. And if he really starts to see those holes in the offensive line, people should really watch out for him. Another story from this game, both teams were absolutely abysmal on third down. 4 of 13 for Memphis and 3 of 13 for the Iron. So I guess this game came down to 1 third down.
That's a very slim margin of victory. I don't know if that was really the key, but a lot of teams in the Alliance really seem to struggle on third down, and it's kind of frustrating to see. So I guess if you can pick that up, you'll win the game, as Memphis seemed to prove with their higher percentage.
Probably the actual key to Memphis' victory, though, was the fact that they had a huge time of possession difference. They held the ball for 45 minutes compared to just 29 minutes for the Iron.
Yeah, they have fantastic time of possession, yet Manziel only had 5 pass attempts in 2 rushes. I don't really understand how that's possible, because you would think more time would mean more chances for your quarterback, but he really didn't do all too much.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that number came to being at all because of how long some of those Iron drives are, but I think it might have been because besides those super long drives that the Iron had, they really didn't get much going on offense most of the time, and Memphis just had a little longer drives on average. So I think that's kind of how they ended up with that really high time of possession. And just controlling the ball, of course, we saw that was the key to the Legends' victory, and that seemed to be one of the big factors in the Express coming away with a win here.
I think they were counting overtime a little bit in there as well.
Oh, that's true. That would make sense.
Yeah.
All right, so to round this game out here, I have my game MVP. I have to give out 2. Mainly it's the quarterback, Brandon Silvers, but Reese Horn also was there, and without Reese Horn and that connection he has with Silvers, who knows what Silvers' passing numbers look like. So pretty much their chemistry led to that win, plain and simple.
Yeah, Brandon Silvers, he's the man. And Johnny was okay in his debut, but nothing stellar. And without Silvers, I don't think the Express win that game. And I think they could have won by more and avoided overtime had Silvers played all 4 quarters. Silvers scored in the clutch when he needed the extending in the game, and he scored in the clutch in overtime when it was on the line. Brandon Silvers gets my MVP because what a stellar performance.
That was awesome. That was great.
And finally, before we go into our final segment, one final word from our sponsor, Orca Coolers. Show off your AAF team pride with Orca Coolers and Drinkware. They are the best coolers and insulated drinkware on the market. I don't know how many times we can say that. Whether
we can say it a lot.
We can. Whether you're going to work, the stadium, or a tailgate, the Orca Team Chaser Tumbler will get you there with an ice-cold or piping hot beverage. The Orca Coolers Team Chaser's new microplated stainless steel color palette lets you carry your favorite team color, while the double-walled vacuum-sealed body ensures that your ice will stay frozen and your drink will stay strong. The team-colored lids allow you to see when it's time for a refill, too. They could just be the perfect cup. Orca Coolers, drinkware, and apparel are available online at orcacoolers.com. That is ORCA Coolers.com. NFL, NHL, MLB, and NCAA team logoed merchandise is also available, so you're ready for every single season. Orca Coolers is extending a special offer just to our listeners. Just enter AAF Analyzed in all caps and no spaces for free shipping when you place your order online. This is a fantastic deal, and I can't stress it enough that you have to take advantage of it because you're saving so much money for such a fantastic product.
Yep. Do it. Get free shipping. Do yourself a favor. A little bit of self-love here. All right. To close out the episode, we will go through our where we were right and where we were wrong, as well as our post-Week 7 power rankings. So, what do we get right this week? Well, I said earlier in the year that once Perez started scoring touchdowns, he'd pour on those TDs, and that seems to be correct so far, as he has 3 touchdowns last week, 2 more this week, and he's really starting to have a nose for the end zone.
It just took like 6 weeks for your prediction to happen.
Yeah, but it did. So that feels good.
I'll keep it on the time of quarterbacks because I did predict that Johnny Manziel was going to get some playing time. I had a good feeling, and he got a lot of playing time, but he didn't really do too much with it. Hopefully we'll see more from him in the future.
Yeah, and once again, another quarterback here. I had said Aaron Murray was my pass for the week, and that was right. He got pulled. He threw 2 picks. He did have a touchdown, but did not have a great game, so he was a hard pass.
Yeah, well, we're talking about our passes. I had Kenneth Farrow as a pass, and he only finished that game with 4 yards. So if you didn't pass
that
on
was
him,
a good pass.
You should have listened to my advice. But not all of it, because let's move into what we got wrong, because Gavin Escobar was not at all a star. He only finished with 6 yards, which is horribly underperforming for a guy I told you to start, and that was just not very helpful for my personal agenda, and I apologize.
For me, Zach Stacy was not a power player. I thought he was going to have a great game, but that Iron defense, particularly the run defense, really stepped up in a way that they hadn't in the past couple weeks, and he got pretty much smothered. If he had taken that 1-yard touchdown run in, he actually probably would have ended with around 11 or 12 points. So that would have been solid, but the ball was handed off to Terrence McGee, so woe is me. I had a pretty rough week in terms of fantasy predictions all around, save for Truesdale and Richardson. So if you listen to me in anything, hopefully it was Truesdale and Trent Richardson, though Richardson is pretty much a start every week. All right, now to officially close out the episode, we have our post-Week 7 power rankings. At number 1, of course, it's the Apollos. They're 6-1. They're the best team in the league. There's really no arguing that.
Yep, the Commanders can keep their spot at number 2. They won again. They have the second best record in the league, and Woodside and everyone else on their team has been so hot, it doesn't look like they can be cooled down. Speaking of hot, though, number 3,
Speaking of another hot
Shots.
team. Yeah, we were on the same page there. On the same page. Speaking of hot, look at us.
Hot Shots,
Co-hosting.
number 3. They now overtake the number 2 seed in the West with that very clutch win over the Fleet. So they've got a good chance at making the playoffs, so we got to put them at 3 there with Wolford's impressive game.
Yeah, the Hot Shots are looking hot, but right underneath them, a team that is cooled off a little bit, but that was a very close loss that they had, and that would be the Iron at number 4. They're 4-3, so we logically put all of the best record teams at 1, 2, 3, and 4. The Iron run defense seems to have its game plan together. The Iron pass defense needs to step up again to return to their normal form from the beginning of the year, and they will be deadly once again. What's really looking good for the Iron, though, is that offense that seems to be cooking right now. The last 8 minutes of the game that they played, they really didn't look like they wanted to win. Really, that last quarter overall, it kind of felt like they thought they had the win in the bag, and then they blew it against the Express. So there is that. So if they can close out that game, they're probably sitting at number 3 instead of number 4, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up making the playoffs.
Yep, number 5, we have the Fleet. They just lost that all-important game on the road against the Hot Shots because they're just not a good team on the road, but they still have a good chance to make the playoffs despite the other teams who are below them on this list, like the Express, Legends, and Stallions, who we have all at 6, 7, and 8. We have the Express at 6, Legends at 7, the Stallions at 8. It's purely ranked about their chances to make the playoffs, as the Express and Legends are above the Stallions, and the Express seem to be riding the hot hand a little bit more so than the Legends. So top 5 are really the teams to watch for, as 6, 7, and 8 appear to be crumbling under their own weight.
Yeah, the Express definitely look like the hottest team there. They're really riding the offensive power of Brandon Silvers, Reese Horn, and Zach Stacy. Unfortunately, we can no longer call them the Zach Attack because we have lost Mettenberger. Rest in peace, Zach Attack 2019 to 2019. But hey, I'm still excited for this Express offense, and their defense has certainly looked pretty good as well. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry if there were any awkward pauses or anything. Our Skype call today has been quite finicky, to say the least. I've had poor connection the entire time. But anyway, we hope you still enjoyed listening nonetheless. Don't forget we will have our Week 8 preview on Friday as things start to heat up in the playoff race. We're super excited to go into these playoffs with you for the inaugural season of the AAF, so keep it tuned in here as we follow everything that's going on with the AAF. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at AAF Analyzed. Once again, we say it so often, but we can't say it enough. Thank you so much for listening and so much for your support. And that is all for this episode. Peace out and play football.
Thank you for listening to the AAF Analyzed podcast. Follow the show on Twitter at AAF Analyzed and feel free to contact the show to have your questions featured on a future episode. And don't forget to check out the show on all other platforms such as iTunes, Overcast, SoundCloud, and YouTube.